Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Max Warframe, where today we're going to be taking a look at one of the newest Prime weapons to be introduced into the game in the 16.11 update, the Vectis Prime. Now the Vectis Prime is the first of the sniper rifles to have been primed, so how does it stack up against its non-prime counterpart? Well, it's got a higher base damage of 275 against the 225 of the standard Vectis, and unlike the standard Vectis where the largest portion of the damage came in impact, the Prime comes with the largest portion, 123.8 in the form of puncture damage, 110 in the form of impact, and a very slightly lower slash damage at 41.2 compared to 56.3. But apart from that fantastic base damage increase, the only things that really have changed from the Vectis Prime over its standard counterpart is the fact that it comes with a 2-round magazine and an extra polarity. The crit chance is still the same at 25% with that 200% multiplier, the 30% status, insane accuracy, and a zoom that isn't too ridiculous to use at short range. Now it also comes with a downsides that the standard Vectis really struggles with as well, such as the single shot weapon versus bullet hose type weapons. The Vectis is often going to struggle to keep up. It's also got a problem that affects the standard weapon but is way more pronounced with the Prime, and that is the fire rate. Now this was a factor that I missed in my original Vectis video, and it wasn't something I was really aware of, and thankfully Fate educated me with that. And it's easier to see the problem in the Prime than it is the standard. Fire rate affects the delay between firing and being able to reload. Now it's not immediately obvious on the standard Vectis, since you can manually reload using R each time anyway, and you can ignore that delay. However, with the 2-round magazine on the Prime, there seems to be a sort of bizarre delay, that delay between the firing of the first round and either the firing of the second round or being able to manually reload it. Now this is actually controlled by the fire rate of the weapon, and something that can be modded to try and eliminate to a certain extent, but it does have an extremely strange feeling to it. Something that really needs to be gotten used to, especially since you're unable to do the manual sort of 1-round manual reload unless you're using a very focused fire rate build. Now normally when I do the Prime weapons I talk about drop tables and when they currently drop, but in this case I don't really feel that I should. With the star map changes just around the corner, the drop chances and the drop locations could easily be here this week, gone the next. So I'm going to put it in the description below where they currently are, and I will update that if and when they change. Okay, so let's move on to starting to mod the Vectis. Now it comes with a V and a dash as standard, however we're going to add 4 form-up, which is another 3 Vs and another dash. We've got a whole bunch of mods remaining the same between the 3 builds. We've got Serration for damage, we've got Split Chamber for multi-shot, we've got Shred, which is going to increase the fire rate and get rid of that delay between shots, plus we've got Punch Through, which is fantastic when you're only firing very, very slowly, and you've only got obviously 2 rounds in the clip with this, so that Punch Through is really very, very useful. We've got Point Strike to take our crit chance up to 62.5%, and Vital Sense, which will give us a 4.4 times multiplier. Now, between the 3 builds, I mean, we're going for mainly elemental damage here, and this is not going to be the Charged Chamber build that I'm going to talk a little bit later about. So we've got Hellfire and Stormbringer for max radiation, and Infect Clip for Toxin. Now I know this weapon has very, very good status, and this has the same problem really as the Daikyu, which means you can mod for status, but they're not really there to do status procs. They're there to kill very, very quickly, very efficiently, rather than to spread status procs around, which is why I don't mod for status. Now in Corpus, Stormbringer cryo rounds for magnetic and Infected Clip for the poison. And in the Void, for non-corrosive projection builds, we've got Infected Clip and Stormbringer, which is going to bring up corrosive damage. And we've got Hellfire for the extra heat damage. And then if you're running corrosive projection, you can change Stormbringer up for cryo rounds, and you'll have viral and heat, which is more for when you're using your 4 corrosive projection build, and it's absolutely brilliant for doing that as well. So I guess onto the biggest question of all, is the Vectis Prime worth the time, effort and the fun to get both parts and then to max it? And the answer to that is a pretty unsurprising absolutely yes it is. Ever since the Vectis Prime has been announced, I've been massively hyped for it. I couldn't even resist making the Let's Max on the standard Vectis recently. I was that hyped. And quite frankly, I think it deserves the hype. That extra damage is absolutely fantastic and really helps out a lot more than I expected. Now I know one of its main features is a bone of contention for those hardcore Vectis users, and that is the 2-round magazine and its relationship with primed and charged chamber. Well, to be honest, I actually don't find it to be that big of a deal at all. At first, I'll admit, I went in with the mindset that the 2-round magazine was going to be crap and it was going to ruin the Vectis. And while, to be honest, it doesn't really feel like a Vectis anymore, it is still an absolutely incredible weapon to use. The original weapon had a flaw in my mind, which was that if it doesn't crit, it doesn't kill, especially when the enemy's levels start to rise. And the one thing the Vectis Prime does with that 2-round magazine and a little bit of fire rate is put 2 rounds very, very quickly down range onto the head if your aim is good, giving off a very nice little burst of damage, especially if one round doesn't crit. The other might finish off those heavier units. Personally, I feel that getting those 2 very quick shots off in succession at those higher levels is more beneficial than having to reload before getting that second shot off, and that delay at those higher levels can often be the time that it takes to get you killed. Now, saying that about the 2-round magazine, you can still mod for a single shot charged or prime chamber build if you want to. A little bit of extra fire rate from things like shred means you can do a manual reload almost immediately after firing that first shot, so getting that Vectis feel can still be an option and really does come down to personal preference. So if you really can't deal with that 2-round magazine, you can choose to ignore it if you want to, but only if you put a little bit of extra fire rate on there. If you don't put the fire rate on, you just seem to have that really weird delay before you can even start reloading, and thus charged chamber build doesn't really work and feels pretty weird and pretty clunky to use. Sniper rifles as a class are one of those classes that you're either going to love or you're going to hate. There are people crying out that snipers need a buff, and then there are those that are saying that used effectively, sniper rifles in the game can be extremely effective at what they do, provided you actually use them right, which is part of the reason that DE hasn't really decided on how best to proceed with them, how they're going to buff them, if they're going to buff them, that sort of thing. Of course, if you're going to try and compete directly with a Soma Prime, for example, you're unlikely to be able to compete, but if you put yourself into a location where you can make the best use of the weapon, then it can be an absolute monster. Sniper rifles in Warframe are not easy to do well with. They take good aim, good accuracy and positioning to be able to use the best of their ability. But when you master that, especially with a weapon as good as the Vectis Prime, you are going to do pretty well with it. So the Vectis Prime, it looks absolutely stunning. It sounds epic, that sharp crack from the old Vectis, mixed with a sort of pew pew laser type noise, plus insane accuracy and a ton of fun to play. It is great fun to use and extremely effective at what it does, provided that you give it a chance before writing it off. As always guys, many thanks for watching. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, it helps me out a ton, and I shall see you in the next episode.